Thank you very much for that very nice introduction, and hello everyone. I've been asked to talk about developing the anesthesia researcher of the future. For many years, the ASA and FAIR have run programs for medical students, and for me at Columbia University in New York, along with many chairs throughout the country, it's been terrific to welcome students into the department. They can work in the laboratory, they attend our seminars, they go to the operating room and grand rounds and meetings and so on, and get a taste, an idea of what it's like to be in an anesthesia department and what it's perhaps like to have a research career. And unfortunately, with the effects of COVID-19 and the pandemic, it's not been possible to do this year, this year. So I'm trying to, with this presentation, make up for that in some small way and talk about how we can develop the anesthesia researcher of the future online like this. I think there's absolutely no doubt about it that mentoring matters. It's the single biggest contributor, I think, to success for a trainee in academic life. I think everybody knows about the Odyssey and how Mentor was asked to help and advise his absent friend's son as his friend embarked on his perilous journeys. And I think it's important to recognize that Mentor was not his friend, he was not his best friend, and he wasn't his mother. So when choosing a mentor and importantly, the kind of department that you're going to work in, I think it's important to cast your net wide. Your mentor does not have to be your chair, your boss, the lab chief, and it's also possible to have several mentors for very different roles. Perhaps your direct supervisor for the science that you're actually doing, someone that you have a very nice chemistry with, that you can talk about building life skills, how you interact with various individuals in academic life, someone that you can develop a career strategy with, and I think incredibly important, networking, someone who can introduce you to lots and lots of different people at lots and lots of different levels who can help you. So it's important to recognize that you have mentors and friends for different stages of your career, and chairs, CEOs of hospitals, deans and so on, they still have mentors and value being able to talk to people about different problems and different ideas. Also important to start early, which is really the point of today. I think it's important not to pick a mentor just because they are warm and fuzzy, they make you feel comfortable, they're the same gender as you are, and someone who doesn't really stretch you, who makes life perhaps a little too easy for you. Of course you want someone you get on with, that you have a nice chemistry, a nice ambience with, but I think it's also important to ask yourself, have they been successful? Have they successfully mentored or trained people before? Where are their former mentees now? And will they be around? Will you be able to later on in life talk to them? Will they be able to act as a coach for you? You want somebody who can be a sounding board, that you can just talk to them about lots and lots of ideas that you have, and you're able to make your own decisions. Another thing I think that can work very well is to have a short-term mentor if you have a specific project, perhaps a certain aspect of a grant or some scientific work that you're doing where you need for a short-term amount of time someone with a special expertise. So your mentor may not be the same as your laboratory chief, it may be. Your mentor should provide you with a broad view of the future, and as I've said, you may need more than one. You may well need a basic scientist and a clinician thematically in the area that you're interested in. They can and should give you advice on life, and they should be prepared to talk regularly to you. It's a job. Later on, when you start applying for grants, you may well have a mentoring committee, a group of individuals who form a committee with different kinds of expertise. I remember when I first went to medical school, and you know, we started off as one does with anatomy, and the very first lecture that I had in medical school was anatomy, and it was given by the chair of anatomy. And he said that there are three things in life, generally you can break it down to. There's your social life, going to parties, meeting people, going out to dinner, the hobbies that you enjoy. The other important aspect is having a family, and some medical students and residents do have families. Some decide to have a family on the way, not all do. And then the third aspect is obviously the job, being a great physician and being a great scientist, and as we're talking today, being a great physician scientist. And what he said was that you can have it all, but you can only have two at any one time. And it's very important to pace yourself and prioritize these aspects of your life. For example, if you were a resident in a New York residency program, you might want to run the New York Marathon. But you shouldn't be running the marathon when in November you have a big grant going in. Perhaps you do it the next year, because what happens is you just feel that you're unsuccessful at both these things. You weren't able to focus on either of them, and neither give you that solid feeling that you did a good job. So better to pace yourself and prioritize and work out what matters to you at that particular time. I was struck as an example of pacing yourself at the Elastic Olympics, when some of the Olympic rowing team were being interviewed, and they said that the only question was, as they got near to the Olympics and really training hard for the Olympics, was, does it make the boat go faster? And if it didn't make the boat go faster, they weren't going to do it. And for the heats for the Olympics, some of the, for the rowing team, some of the early heats were on the first 2 days of the Olympics. And, as you can imagine, or at least as I would imagine, the most exciting, or one of the most exciting things about being at the Olympics must surely be going into the arena, following your own country's flag, and representing your country for the Olympics, whether you win a gold medal or not. And it was a very difficult decision, I'm sure, but the competitors who were rowing in the first 2 days in the heats elected not to march. Tough decision, but they decided it was more important to get an early night, sleep well, and think about the next day, rather than marching at the Olympics, which was a very late night, evening opening event. So does it make the boat go faster? And not to say that you've got to work and study all the time or work at research, because certainly wellness makes the boat go faster, and vice versa. And, I think it's a good motto, not just for sport or for the Olympics, but to some extent it's a good motto for life in general. I've just spent the last 5 minutes talking about strategies for success and perhaps giving advice, but I think to some extent you also got to learn when to ignore advice. especially about what you can't do. I also think it's important to pick a great laboratory or work with a team that has a successful record, that's positive, and has a passion and enjoys what they're doing, and a team that can help you ask an important scientific question. And if you can't explain it to your mother or your grandmother, why the topic that you're working on over the summer, for example, when they say, you know, what on earth are you doing up at Columbia for the summer? If you can't explain why it matters, then it probably doesn't matter. So, you know, I think a key to success is to love it, have a passion for what you do, not to say that you're going to love every day. I think that many days are torture. And often, you know, you don't know what's important, you don't know what's pivotal, you don't know what actually gave you happiness until you're at a stage in your life when you're looking back and you say, you know, that actually was a great summer, or that actually was a great project that I did, and how pivotal that was to why I'm where I am today. Because what you're doing with some of these programs is you're starting to build a portfolio, a story, a CV for future success. So important to embrace the opportunities that are offered. And also, and I'd say this in an era of COVID-19, important not to get distracted, to obviously do your best clinically for all the problems that are going on international level, but watch out for your own priorities and don't get distracted. I did decide when we looked at, you know, what the three things were in life, that having a family for me was very important. And we took a lot of holidays, just the four of us, and decided that was going to mean a lot for us. And I remember one time when we were away New Year's Eve, we met a professor and his wife. She was also a professor actually from New York. And on New Year's Eve in the afternoon, about 4 o'clock, they were sitting by the beach and they had a whole mass of papers on a table at the bar, and they were having a pina colada, and weren't really sure what they were doing. And we asked them, what are you doing? And they said, oh, we do this every New Year's Eve. We decide what our goals are going to be for next year. And then having decided those goals, we decide what actually needs to be done January and February. And when we get back January 3rd or 4th back to New York, we hit the ground running without worrying about the goals for the whole year, what we're going to do in January. And I actually thought it was a very good idea, and decided that I would do that myself, is think about what the goals are going to be for the coming year. So think about long-term goals and think about short-term goals. And as you can see from this slide, we certainly were able to have a good time. And this is a picture of my son, certainly welcoming in the new year, and certainly knowing how to party at a very early age. Most departments of anesthesiology have an incredible investment in resident and faculty development, and it's an enormous investment in terms of time and resources. I at Columbia and many other departments have now developed programs like the one I developed at Columbia called the Apgar Scholars program, which combined residency with a 2 or 3 year fellowship all in one, so that we were able to develop a research career right through residency and going on into fellowship. And it now has a separate match for medical students. And there are many of these programs now throughout the country. So that's one way that we are developing the anesthesia researchers of the future. There's also a lot of work going on with junior faculty development, with FAIR and the ASA, with T32 training programs from NIH and K Awards. And yet again, I think it's important to emphasize that research is not all basic science research. There's certainly clinical research, but there's also very important research going on in anesthesiology, in education, in administration, in healthcare economics, in behavior, the economics of an operating room, the economics of ICUs, behavioral aspects of operating rooms and ICUs as well. Very important research, which is really coming into its own, health services research, which can be really interesting. So the chair's role, I think, is to listen and understand your goals, listen and understand the trainees' goals. Your ideas of future success may well be very different from what I think your goals should be. But so my job, I always thought, was to understand what your goals are and then help you achieve your goals. However, often trainees don't yet really understand what their goals are. And part of the job really as a mentor and a chair is to help them understand what their goals are. Other trainees, other residents, other medical students know exactly where they want to go, but they don't really know how to get there and what it will take to get there. And that's why I think the chair should be in the background, making sure that you're checking all the boxes and positioning the person for success, for promotion, and making sure that you do indeed have a complete portfolio, that you're able to show that you've had the right kind of training to be successful. And I think what's really important, again, to recognize is that it's certainly true for me, that your success is my success. And there's nothing, I think, that makes a mentor more happy, is seeing their mentee doing well and being successful, and being successful in the kind of way that they're actually enjoying their success. So thank you very much for listening, and look forward to talking to you and answering any questions that you might